All right, I'm hanging up.
This is the town council work session of Thursday, September 9th, 2021. Appreciate y'all being here. I'm sorry for the delay. We have a council member who has asked permission to Zoom in, and we were waiting to get her on Zoom. So there are some new regulations now wherein if we have a physical quorum present and there is a legitimate reason, a member of council can announce the new regulation. So at this point, all right, can we hear Mary?
She was gonna put her ear pods in.
Okay.
Here.
You are here, okay.
I'll talk for a second and see if you can hear me.
All right. Make sure you can.
Can you hear me?
Can everyone out there in the audience hear her? Okay, that's
Can
great.
anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We hear you.
Yes,
Can you hear me? Yes?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry, we're gonna go through this protocol here. So that, I'm now calling the meeting to order. And before we move further, I have established we have a quorum. Mary Hanson asked if she could come in remotely. She is, I believe, in California. And she wishes to participate remotely. And Mary, we're gonna ask you your reason for your remote participation.
Okay. My reason for my remote participation is a family medical issue involving my 5-year-old grandson here in Berkeley, California, which is where I am participating from.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion approving the request for Mary.
Motion for Mary to attend remotely.
Second.
Okay, thank you very much. Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All right, let's vote on it. Ms. Austin.
Yes.
Mr. Cooney.
Yes.
Dr. Goldsmith.
Yes.
Mr. Holberg.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
And Mayor votes yes too. Okay, Mary, you are allowed. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we are going to proceed as we should. Roll call, obviously, we're all here because we all voted. Mary is here remotely. We're going to stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. Okay, we're going to start off the evening. We've got a couple of really distinguished guests here. I'm going to start off by saying I apologize for the delay in this happening. We have 2 retired members of town council and also a retired town attorney. Can y'all hear me okay? All right. And we are recognizing their gifts to us of their time and talents. As I said, this should have been done back in January, but the COVID situation made that impossible. And then there were other considerations that delayed our ability to do this. So with that apology, please don't think that we didn't appreciate everything. First, I'm going to note that Mr. Andrew Burry, our former town attorney, is one of our recipients. And if you look in the front there, we have some beautiful awards for these folks. Mr. Burry let us know that he would not be able to attend, but he will be receiving it. And we do appreciate his 12 years serving as town attorney, particularly in our time of need when he got us out of some bad stuff. And next I'm going to recognize Mr. Boyd Wiley and his wife Brenda. And Boyd, we're going to thank you for your, it was 4.5 terms. You finished somebody else's term, so 9 years on town council. And wonderful service. Thank you so much. You want me to get up and hand you? I'll get up and hand you that. I'm going to have to.
Yes, yes.
So,
We got a photographer over there.
okay, hold on just a second. Get that too. Okay. Gotta make sure you do the right one. What? Well, you can get more than one picture.
We're gonna put one in the paper.
So hard to do this.
I'll do this and then.
I'll do it.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we get this recorded. Thank you, Boyd. We also have Dr. George DeVries and his wife Helen. Thank you so much.
Very beautiful.
It's
There's-
beautiful, isn't it? And George,
Boyd.
if you will come up, I do want
Boyd.
to say that he served for
There's
two
a box
terms,
for
and
it,
he's actually
it's
still
propping Mary up
serving.
right now.
He's in charge of the new lamp posts.
Yeah, the light cones, all on
The light posts, yes.
which we're gonna morph into light
This is
poles
propping Mary
at some
up.
point.
Or the ones for the
We get
awards.
aluminum.
Thank you, George. Thank you so much. Okay, Renee.
Oh, God.
There you go.
Everybody happy? Ready, set, 3, 2, 1. And one more time, set.
Don't back up anymore.
All right.
You can take the front one. I think the computer will be okay.
All right, thank you very much. All right, with that, I'm not gonna really dismiss you guys, but thank you. So now let's get right down to our reports, and we'll start with our town administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Oyster Festival Committee has held several meetings over the past couple of weeks discussing whether to move forward with the Oyster Festival this year in light of the increase in cases of the COVID variant. Last week, we met with Dr. Williams, the Director of Middle Peninsula Health Department, who gave a presentation on the COVID variant, how it's impacting the county, and projections for moving forward into November. Last night, a meeting was held with representatives of nonprofits and town businesses to hear their thoughts and concerns. And after much discussion, the consensus was that at this point that they're still moving forward with holding the Oyster Festival. But the next committee that's going to be meeting is going to be the Public Safety Committee, and they're meeting, I think, next Wednesday or Thursday. So we're still looking at this, and during Dr. Williams' report, he projected, and of course that's what everybody's doing with this stuff, is that we're projecting that the spike would be on the downhill by November, and that's what we're hoping for. And the concern obviously is, number one, safety and the spread of the COVID, but also this would be the second year in a row that we haven't had the Oyster Festival, and a lot of our nonprofits and businesses rely on the money that they make during that weekend to get them through the winter. So it's a pretty serious concern, but they're doing their best and trying to figure out how to best navigate through this. I reported out at the last meeting that the DMV Select project, we had been approved. Well, they don't like you to use that term. They like to say they are partnering with Urbanna, and that we're projecting that we're going to bring DMV Select, and it will start the middle of January. And this is we're thinking this is going to be a win-win for the town, for Middlesex, and the surrounding area. And Barry Browning from DMV, he's the director of DMV Select, is going to be making an official presentation at the next council meeting, which is September 23rd. I'll just give you a brief rundown. What the compensation for the town will be 4.5% up to $500,000 in revenue, and 5% over compensation of over 500,000. And we've got several contracts here that Ms. Arard has got to look at, and then we'll officially take a vote from council at the 23rd meeting once he does his official presentation. Farmers Market is scheduled for this Saturday, 9/11 at Tabor Park from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And Marnie Hart, who heads that project up, has approximately 20 vendors signed up. She's also got a petting zoo and a plastic car display scheduled, and it's going to be from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We've also got a golf cart run is scheduled at 11 a.m. and we're asking that this is to honor 9/11 and that catastrophe, and it's a somber event, and we're asking those to have a flag or decorate their carts and meet at the unique golf carts at 10:30. Eric, do you have anything?
The only other.
Please, Coach, make sure you turn on the microphone button at the front.
Yeah, the other thing that we're going to do, we're trying to have a fundraiser type situation where people can make contributions to Tunnel to Towers in honor and recognition of 9/11. So that's the only thing that I can add. But we hope to have a good golf cart turnout like we've always had in the past.
And we thank you, Eric, for coordinating this. And Mayor, that concludes my report. The rest of the stuff is going to come up under on the agenda under various items.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have someone to report on the treasurer's report.
Yes. The operating bank account as of 8/31, $583,885.32. We have renter water deposits of $14,551. BB&T Historic Trust, $21,795. The pool replacement account is still at $36,761.57. The water fund reserve is at $113,782, and the general fund reserve is $94,628. The Sona Bank Cares Local Recovery Fund is $237,602, and the Tabor Trust as of June 30th is $1,476,022. Meals tax collected in August is $16,638.47. Lodging tax, $1,625.18. Sure.
The Sona Bank Cares Local Recovery money that we've received so far, what portion of that total gift, the total gift is that, the total package?
It's half of another $237,600 and change.
Can I, amend that? It's $237,602.06.
Yeah, what did I say?
That's CARES Act money.
Oh, sorry. It's been a long day.
The point is, we'll receive the other half of that, in the next fiscal year.
Yes.
That's, all right.
Thank you very much. Okay, do we have? Go ahead.
Lodging tax. Are we collecting from all those folks that are renting their places on weekends? Have we identified them all?
Yes, and I'll tell you, Michelle is pretty aggressive about that. She actually went out last week and found one that had recently opened up and sent them the paperwork, and they promptly responded.
Okay, do we have a finance report? Finance committee.
Finance, the only thing was that the rescue squad had an increase in their rent to stay in town of $200 for the year, and it was the consensus of the finance committee that we pay that. It seemed like a no-brainer to keep them here. So that's the only thing. I don't think it needs to be voted on because it's a small amount, but we figured we should cover it.
Right, and you also did email the members and you got it.
Yes.
That's it. Thank you.
200 a month, 200 a year, 200 a year.
Small price to pay. Thank you.
Could I add something to that?
Yes.
One of the things that has prevented us in the past from acting quickly on money that's been set aside by the state for repairs to marina has been we've always saved money so that we had the entirety of the bill covered before we actually paid it. And what that does is it takes us a while to accumulate enough money so that we have the money to pay our share, plus the 75% of the state that will be reimbursed. And what I had suggested to Garth and Roy was that perhaps we ought to look into a short-term dedicated borrowing that would allow us to bridge from point A to point B. In other words, not current cash for a particular project that's funded through bid, but go ahead, borrow the money, have it available to pay the bills, and then apply for the reimbursement, and the state will ultimately reimburse. I'd just like to get a straw poll. Does anybody on council think that's a good idea or a bad idea?
You're looking at a short-term line of credit.
Short-term line of credit dedicated to covering big grant expenses that we have to pay out of pocket before we get reimbursed.
And when he says bid, that's
Voting
voting
infrastructure grant.
VIG.
In terms of large size, right now, I think we have to borrow or use $136,000 before we can actually get any further big grant funding. Is that correct? And then we'll get reimbursed up to $108,000.
Yes, can I comment on this?
Go ahead.
Yes, sir,
But-
please.
and Steve talked to us about this, and it's actually a good idea because as he's pointing out, we can't put in for reimbursement of that grant. It's sitting out there, but we're having to keep track and spend money out of their coffers. And we will not get reimbursed until 2023, October 2023. So Steve's point is to, instead of having to pull that out of our coffers, that we get a short-term loan, just like he's saying, and then we're not pulling it from our coffers. We can, and then pay that loan off 2023.
My understanding is once we have paid or incurred
covered under our grant application, that then we submit those costs and we would get reimbursed on fairly short order. It's not like we have to wait until 2023, but we have to have at least spent that money and gotten reimbursement before we can apply for another big grant in 2023. Are you catching my distinction?
Yeah, but I'd have to double check but it's my understanding, if memory serves me, that it's reimbursable in 2023. I'll double check that to make sure, but I mean,
Because I think what we did previously, we did the dredging project, if I'm not mistaken, and it was about, what, 125,000. We paid it up front and then got a recovery fairly quick. We didn't have to wait.
My understanding is the same as yours.
Yeah, okay. So,
I'll double check.
Would this be an appropriate time for any other comments or questions from the guys?
I agree with Steve.
here's what I suggest, that if we could charge Roy and the finance committee, let's come up with a target. I know that 136,000 is what we currently have as a grant request. You know, it's not in the hopper. And let's scope that out and see if that's a good target, or do we want to expand it to include anything else? I wouldn't see any reason to. I would just go to 136. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So should we craft a motion for the next town meeting and allow ourselves a chance to discuss this and refine it?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
All right, very good. Thank
So
you.
Steve, would you like to make a motion?
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and craft something formally to allow the finance committee and Boyd Time and Garth Wheeler to pursue short-term financing with a lender in this area that would provide us with 136,000 short-term borrowing to be dedicated to projects at the marina that would be eventually within the scope of the big boating infrastructure grant that we have in play right now. That's a little complicated.
There you go.
That's what it is.
Fortunately, we have it recorded. So the
No, we
motion has
don't.
been made and seconded. Do we have any discussion on it? There being no discussion, let's take a vote. Mr. Holbert?
Aye.
Ms. Austin? Mr. Jonick? Dr. Goldberg? Goldsmith? Excuse me.
I was looking for him. Yes.
Sorry. And Mr. Smith?
Yeah.
And Ms. Hanson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor votes yes too. Motion passes. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry. Dr.
Thank you all so
Goldsmith,
much.
thank you.
I can actually eat dinner on Thursday.
There you go.
There you go. There you go.
Good night, Brenda.
Thank y'all.
Good night. All right. Thank you very much. Uh-oh. There you go. Do we have a report from the Water Commission?
Labor Day, the Water Committee didn't meet, but we are presently working with Kimberly Horn on a professional preliminary engineering report, which is in process now. Roy has submitted documentation on water rates and everything that's required. It seems that it's going to be a little bit of a drawn-out process. With the USDA application, they'll be looking through the engineering report, and it has to go to Georgia to be reviewed. So it's going to take a little time. We did meet with the engineer about 2 weeks ago, I believe, and he gave us a timeline. And I know that there's been a question, why are we going after the new well when we don't have to have it in by 2024? Timeline for construction, October 2023 for completion. So this is right up against the deadline. So we have to move forward.
Thank you very much. All right, Mary Hanson, you have something for the Planning Commission?
Just that the August Planning Commission report was already submitted at the August town council meeting. The regular planning commission meeting would have been scheduled for Tuesday, the 14th. We've decided to not have a planning commission meeting this month, but instead to have one in October. So there is nothing new as far as planning commission minutes are concerned.
Thank you very much. All right, and that leaves pool committee. Do we have something to report there?
Cool. It is moving forward. Garth has got some meetings scheduled for with people that could be partners as well as potential construction companies and also communities that are in similar circumstances for us to feel out this project. But those things are scheduled for the next upcoming weeks, so there's nothing to report with specifics, but just that it's moving forward.
Thank you very much. All right, so that brings us to Steve. You have something to add?
I do have a question with regards to finances. Where do we stand? We heard back from the auditor as to when we're going to have that audit started.
No.
So we'll have to follow up.
Sure.
Not
Yes.
that it's yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just like to say something. I don't know why I need to remind you all of this. All of you know this. But interest rates are an all-time low. You're pushing this thing forward on the school, trying to get partnerships. If you ought to see if you can get the money, and then try to get partnerships.
Yeah.
But I think we need to move faster on this thing than we're moving.
I think you have 100% agreement there. Yes, sir.
Mhm.
Thank you. And thank you for the reminder. And Garth, we need to look into exactly what we need to have under our belts before we can go to a bank and talk to them about this. We need to define that.
Right.
And sooner better than later.
What I did was I shared with Roy and Garth a cash flow illustration Excel spreadsheet that I did when I was married. It goes from 2012 to 2018. They have the ability to finish that. That demonstrates what our cash flow has been in the past. And so that would be a tool that would be helpful when you go tomorrow. Okay?
Thank you. Very good.
Mayor,
Yes.
I would like a clarification on why the audit has not yet commenced. We've been talking about this since February, I believe. And so what is the holdup?
All right. Garth,
What's the whole,
the holdup on the audit.
on the audit? Mary wants to know.
I didn't hear I was talking.
Counselor Hanson wants to know what the holdup is, why we have not moved forward on the audit.
The auditor hadn't gotten back to me.
Okay, maybe he needs a reminder.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, funding could hinge on what happens with our audit. We really need an auditor who's gonna actually follow through and move this forward for us.
Thank you. All right, are we ready to move on to old business? Okay, old business, and let's see, I have under here, we have an HRSD report or update.
There had been some concern about the HRSD providing the town information in a timely manner. And this was discussed, and Ms. Arard has met with their attorney, HRSD's attorney, and the various folks that are involved, and they have supplied the town with the necessary documentation. And we have a letter from the Conway Shield, who is the HRSD attorney, and he has assured us that they are going to be transparent and provide us with information prior to moving forward. And like I said, we have gotten some of the paperwork and so forth, and Ms. Arard and he are communicating on a regular basis.
And Mr. Shield has said that Mr. Field has said that, if there's anything that we hear about that town staff does not already know about it, that he wants me to notify him immediately. So he's made a pretty strong commitment to the transparency.
No more surprises.
Hopefully not.
Thank you. Okay, and one other item under old business is the Blue Water Pier update. Is there anything further on that?
Yes, I simply want to say that we continue to do research, including we're looking at doing depth soundings to try to understand better what the parameters of possibility are with the Virginia Street Dock and Pier project that Barbara is also referring to as the Blue Water Pier project. Our hope is to have some actual concrete ideas to propose and discuss at the October working session, and then hopefully to have some specific proposal to forward to the October Town Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other old business? All right, let's move on to new business. First on the list is repairs to the culvert at the marina.
This project has actually been on the books for quite some time, and I know there was some discussion at the last meeting, and we have asked for some quotes to have the culvert repaired, and we had one contractor go down and look at it last week, and he has not provided an estimate at this point. And Roy actually reached out to another contractor, and Bryant Structures Incorporated, and sent them some paperwork that we had regarding the culvert, and they have come back and said that they indeed did do that kind of work. They thought that the $80,000 estimate that we were projecting was low, but they would come over and take a look at it. So we are moving forward with trying to get that fixed.
Could I ask a question about that? We were talking about basically doing the flat road bed over the existing culvert, over the box that exists there. Have we investigated any kind of possibilities to possibly build an arched bridge over there that would allow people to enter Jameson Cove in a kayak or a canoe without lying down in the boat?
We've got that on the plans.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see. Brings us to charter changes.
Okay, everybody's aware that I think that there was some controversy, if you will, about the mayor's ability to vote, and we, I guess, a while back, actually July 9th, we got an official opinion from the Attorney General advising that the mayor of Urbanna did indeed have the right to vote. And as we had discussed when this was being discussed at previous meetings, no matter what the Attorney General had to say about it, we were going to move forward with having a charter change made so that there would be no question about this for the future. And so we have a resolution, and Delegate Keith Hodges has agreed to carry this resolution forward for us. And the resolution reads, at a meeting of the Urbanna, Virginia Town Council held on September 9th, 2021 at 7 p.m. on a motion duly made by Council Member Blank, because we don't know that yet, and seconded by Council Member Blank, the following resolution was adopted by the following vote. Assuming all of y'all will vote aye. a resolution requesting that the Urbanna Town Charter be amended to clarify that the mayor possesses a right to vote, whereas the Urbanna Town Charter specifically acknowledges that the town of Urbanna shall be governed by a town council composed of 6 council members and a mayor, and whereas the Urbanna Town Charter is silent as to whether or not the mayor has the right to vote, and whereas the Honorable Mark Herring, Attorney General of Virginia, in an official opinion dated July 9th, 2021, opined that the mayor of Urbanna has the right to vote in accordance with Virginia Code 15.2-1423. Now therefore be it resolved that the Urbanna Town Council respectfully requests that the Urbanna Town Charter be amended to be consistent with state law and specify that the mayor has the right to vote in all matters brought before Town Council.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question before we go further?
Yes.
Because one of the things that we did back in February was look at some other town charters in the state of Virginia that echoed the language that we actually practice. Okay. And the town of Herndon came closest in 3.6 powers and duties mayor. Town of Herndon. This sounds like it's close enough to it to get the job done. But what it said was the mayor should be the chief executive officer of the town. He or she shall have and exercise all the power and authority conferred with the town council and shall have the same right to speak and vote, speak and vote therein as the members of the town council. And I've got the word verbiage right here. Can you address my point there?
Yes. So this resolution is what we would take to Delegate Hodges to get the ball rolling. And then usually what happens is Delegate Hodges would ask me to prepare draft language that then he gives to the legislative staff there. And then hopefully they'll stick with my language. Sometimes they don't.
And I'm not finding fault with it. I'm just suggesting that given we have a legislature that's predominantly controlled by Democrats in the northern part of the state, that the closer we get to language that's already in a Northern Virginia town charter would be probably a safe bet. I didn't want to stray too far from that. That was my only concern.
I'll be happy to present that to council for you to approve before I give it to Delegate Hodges.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that clarification.
I had the same issue, and it sort of says it in there, but I think in crafting the language, it should say that the council is made of 6 council members and a mayor as part of the structure, so that they then fit into the structure of the quorum and all the voting rights.
And I would concur with that because part of the Herndon Town charter says in section 3.1, the town of Herndon shall be governed by a town council, which is the structure issue that you just mentioned.
Right.
Composed of 6 council members and a mayor, all of whom shall be qualified voters of the town. Candidates for town offices should not be identified on the ballot, blah, blah, blah. So that's section 3.1. I can give you copies of these. I just want to make sure that we have the best chance of success. If we're going to do this, let's do it right the first time and not have to come back. But I don't have any problems with what you. With
The reason this was drafted like this is because the charter already says all of the other stuff. This is asking for specific change.
And as I believe the state code says everything that we need to match up, that the mayor has the right to vote but does not have the right to veto, and that the mayor has the right to make motions just like anybody else.
I'll prepare the language for your next council meeting.
Thank you. So the question now is,
We have a follow-up question.
I guess we have a follow-up
I do
question.
have a follow-up
Go ahead.
question because it's a related issue. One of the things that we discussed is the perennial weakness that this council structure has because it does not have staggered terms. Are you planning to address that issue at some point?
Yes, we kind of decided that time is of the essence for this. And we already knew this was a no-brainer. We hadn't really discussed at length the other things with the other members of council. So, and there's also some things that we've identified in the charter that is antiquated as in descriptions of the boundaries. So what we wanted to do was sit down with some members of council, look at the charter in its entirety, and then bring forward changes such as what you're talking about at a later time.
Okay, thanks for that. I appreciate that.
I'll just like to comment on that. I'm in favor of 4-year terms and staggering.
So what it's looking like at this point is, in the name of getting at least this much done, we would actually be going after a town charter upgrade 2 years in a row. Because first we would be moving to address the mayor's issues, and then we would possibly in the next year look at changing the length of term and making staggered things and other idiosyncrasies that you found in the charter. Is that correct?
Yes.
So here's the only point that I would make. It's my understanding that Mr. Hodges has a limited number of issues that he can bring for approval in a particular cycle, okay? So if we're able to combine a couple in one swift motion, that we don't tax him and tax state legislator consideration of these changes that we want to make. I'm just throwing that out there, that I don't know what the timeline is. I don't know what changes we are contemplating that need to be made to account the charter as it stands now in order to effect some form of staggered term. But I suggest that if we try to combine the two, it's always the will of council, in order to present a tactical advantage to consideration. I'd rather not go back. If I had my brothers, but it's entirely up to you guys.
Mary has something to say.
Mary,
I have a hand up on this as well. And if we wait a year on staggered terms, that's going to put us in an election cycle. It's going to put us right in an election cycle. I don't know, again, what it is that we would need to discuss and decide in order to advance this at this point, and if it is a realistic hope for us to do so. I think that I'm with Steve on that. I think that would be a good thing to do.
If council is ready to move forward with 4-year terms and staggered elections, then y'all could vote on that and we could include it in this. But it's important that we get this in. I mean,
Yes.
Delegate Hodges' aide wants this in by September, and we're in September. So
all right, so would this be 2 separate motions? First, we would move to accept this as written, and we'd make a second motion to also include the other issues.
I would recommend that you wait, and let's vote on it at the next meeting, and Delegate Hodges' aide will be okay.
All right, then we will table this issue tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for making that a priority, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Lost my place. All right, so the next item on the agenda under new business is a food truck event, which Ms. Austin would like to address.
There's been some interest in having a food truck festival around April in the park on a Saturday for one day. Not so it doesn't take away from the businesses, it doesn't do anything like that. I started to do a little bit of research and legwork on it. It's really fluid at this point. There's about 16 food trucks that are nearby. Right now I have 6, depending on what council decides, that will commit to coming mid-April for a Saturday food truck festival.
Okay, and what are you hoping to accomplish tonight?
The okay to go ahead and keep working on it, get the, I don't wanna, I don't wanna continue on where I'm at without council saying, yeah, we wanna do this, because, you gotta get, these people have to commit, and then you've gotta commit far out.
All right, so do we need to make a motion?
Well, could we have some discussion first?
Well,
That's
yes.
it. I just like to discuss things before I vote.
Well, no, but the question is, I was going to make room for that, but the question is, do we need, if we're going to move forward with this, do we need to make a motion to have her continue looking into this, or can we simply discuss it now?
Yeah,
See?
just discuss it, I think. Look, here's my concern. The initiative is always noble to invite other food vendors here. I understand that it's an economic driver. However, we have great loyalty. We should show great loyalty to those restaurants that are here, that are working their butts off to survive through COVID and employ local staff. And so I'm of two opinions about it. That's all I have to say. I'm not 100% for it. I'm not, I see it a little bit differently. That's all I have to say.
Would this be in more or less a farmer's market kind of format?
Yeah, everybody, all the food trucks come to the park, 10 to 2, 10 to 3, and a one-day thing. If it's a hit, we can, make it an annual, but, even the restaurants, there shouldn't be any reason they couldn't, throw some tables on the
Right.
sidewalk and join in,
Right.
if that's, it's not at all to take away from the restaurants. We've all supported them, all through this, so, it's not at all for that, but there's just been a lot of interest, in having a food truck, just like they do in West Point on Friday.
Right.
Mayor, may I just say that
Okay.
my understanding of food truck events or food truck roundups like that is, again, it's going to bring additional people in from out of town. It's a reason for people to come into town, which means that everybody's going to get more business. So just a thought.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Golson.
I just wondered whether you had any feel from any of the restaurants in town as to how they felt about it.
No,
mean, it's a good idea.
I didn't approach the restaurants. I can, but I have not. I needed to approach.
And
You
you're
guys
right, they
first.
could always set up their own little tables and.
Yeah, I don't see
and
why we,
have two, exposure in two locations.
or if they
can
want
find
to,
staff.
come bring a table or their little grill from, something different down there and throw a butt on the grill. Yeah, the ambulance.
I would just suggest, along with Dr. Goldsmith, maybe check with some of the local restaurants.
Oh,
Make
definitely.
sure that we have their support
Right.
if that's the case. I don't know.
Okay, so I think we're at a point where, Ms. Austin, you're going to continue researching this.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
and to be considered again at a later date.
So I'll check with the restaurants, see what their feel is. If they're against it, then we'll say no. But it does bring people here.
It's a festival event.
Absolutely.
Ms. Arati.
Madam Mayor, if I might add that in West Point, they do it during a certain time of the year. It's on Friday evenings. And they don't have a whole bunch of food trucks. They have sort of, one or two or three or four. And then they kind of rotate who those vendors are. So I don't know if that makes a difference in terms of not detracting from local businesses.
Yeah, this was just a one day,
Yeah.
mid-April on a Saturday. We've got the polar plunge, the chili cook-off, we've got stuff that goes on. But then you've got April kind of just out there before the May, for the campground opens back up for tourists to come back in and our campers and all that. So that just gives, if nothing else, just local folks, but usually a food truck brings people, just like it does to West Point, because I've been there myself to West Point.
So this is the creation of a new event.
Yes.
All right, very good. Museum in the Streets, West Point Historical Society.
Yeah, the West Point Historical Society had 4 members from the organization come to Urbanna last Thursday to look at, I thought they wanted to look at just the bit signs, but they really wanted to look at a lot more than that, historical signs in general. And I didn't think about it, but Urbana's got a lot of historical signs. We started down here at Brista's, and we had, the demographics of this group was three with gray hair like mine and a young fellow. And the young fellow took out his phone, went up to the sign, and the app works. Woo, fantastic. I couldn't believe it. But the apps are working throughout town. And that's fantastic. We then went down to the museum, and of course, we had three different types of historical signs there. We had the mid sign, the state highway sign, and then some older signs that we'd done generationally before MITs. And they looked at all those, and just a perspective, it looks like to me that the older signs are getting to the point that they're gonna need refurbishing. Or, I'm not talking about it right now, but they're gonna need something done to them in the near future. We then went down to the marina, and of course, there are three different types of signs down there. There's a mid sign, there's a John Smith sign, which is a state sign, and there's a sign that the young man put, who was on the Get Eagle Scout on demonstrating how oysters grow. They were impressed with all those, but they were really impressed with the fact that the town of Urbanna and back-town councils had the foresight to buy a marina. Then we went over to Waterman's Park, and that's sort of what they were looking at. All they have as far as waterfront access in West Point is they have a boat ramp, and they have 50 feet at the end of the road all the way down to York River. And it's not as long as what we have at Waterman's Park, but it's close to what they have. And they were very impressed with the way we had laid that thing out. And they were very impressed with the signage, the new signage that's been put in there. In fact, they had actually talked to the vendor before they came here, same vendor that put that one in. And I think that's probably the route they're gonna go. It's a lot cheaper than this. But in general, it's nice to know that people are coming to us to see what we have. And I just wanted to let you all know that.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
And for those who weren't here or don't remember, Mr. Tuning was emblematic. He was the guy that got this going along with Mr. Bob Calvis. Two of them worked on this together and brought in a number of other people, but they were the brain and the spine that made this happen. Thank you very much. All right, one last thing, and this will be by our attorney, Ms. Gerard. She has some information from the Department of Labor.
Just be able to click it, if not.
Click the OK. Or
I
click the
think
arrow.
it's down, yeah,
Down.
click the down if you need to. If push comes to shove, I'll run over there and do it.
I've really enjoyed working with you all, and I hope that after I finish this presentation, I'll still be employed. Please don't shoot the messenger. My goal in this is to simply tell you what the state requirements are. And I am as divided and unhappy about the pandemic as I think everybody else is. So back during the early part of the pandemic, the Virginia Department of Labor had some interim regulations that they passed to tell employers what they needed to do. And then those regulations became a final standard, and that was adopted in January. Of course, as things change, they changed the regulations. And over the summer, they started looking at a modified version of these regulations. And they approved them in August, and then the regulations go to the governor. The governor has 30 days, and so you don't really know anything that's going to happen until the governor signs it. And so yesterday, the governor signed this. And so these regulations actually took effect yesterday. The Virginia Department of Labor is sort of the state arm of our federal entity that we all know as OSHA. Where do I point this?
I think towards there. Yeah.
There are penalties for violating these regulations, and I wanted to start out by pointing these out. The maximum penalties for a serious violation is $12,726. If there's a willful violation, it's $127,254. Likewise, same for a repeat violation, and for a failure to abate, it's $12,726 per day. So I bring this to your attention because back in the spring, there was a lot of discussion amongst local government attorneys about these investigations that the Department of Labor was doing. And what was happening is in some localities, they were having multiple complaints investigated at one time. And people were asking questions about it. So as I understand it, the Department of Labor was working on a complaint basis, but also on just kind of a sporadic check basis. That has sort of eased up over the summer, but I would anticipate that with the adoption of these regulations that they'll probably go back to it. Okay, so the regulations require that as an employer, there has to be a policy in place to ensure that there's requirements to protect employees from workplace exposure to COVID. And I will also add that, there is the potential for workers' comp liability, both in terms of COVID exposure and if there would be a requirement to vaccinate and then a reaction to the vaccine. The policy that we will have to create has to have a provision so that anonymous complaints of violations can be made. None of this is anything we have any discretion over. This is like we have to do what they say. The good part is it says in here that if the employer enforces its policy as to anonymous complaints and addresses them, that then if there's a subsequent complaint to the Department of Labor, they're going to deem that we were in compliance because we took it upon ourselves to fix it. So I think that's a really good provision. That is something that was not in the regulations before. These regulations also address vaccinated and unvaccinated employees. And in terms of unvaccinated employees and at-risk employees, there is a requirement of wearing face coverings or surgical masks while indoors. And they talk about, they're very specific that it must cover the nose and mouth and it must extend under the chin. The part that I put in red, which is not really showing up so well, talks about fully vaccinated employees. And it says that a fully vaccinated employee in an area of substantial or high community transmission must also wear a mask. And I'm sad to say that that is, I think, every locality in Virginia, when you look at the map. This here is from the CDC website. I pulled it today, and it covers the last week from September 1 to September 7. We've got a positivity rate of 15.45%, which is really pretty high. And it's especially high in light of the vaccination rate, which is 54.9%. That's a really high vaccination rate when you look at all of the other localities. Even like Henrico, where I live, I think it's like 33% vaccinated. So that is certainly a high number. And then this next slide is, it gives you the 7-day percent change. And so in the last 7 days, there was a 2.5% increase in positivity. So the bad news is that everybody in an employment context should be wearing a mask. There are exceptions, and the exceptions are when an employee is alone in a room, or if an employee is eating and drinking at the workplace, provided that they can be 6 feet away or separated by a physical barrier. As an employer, we're required to assess the workplace for hazards that could potentially transmit the virus to employees, and we're required to inform employees of methods to self-monitor for signs and symptoms of COVID. There's a training component that has a later deadline that is also part of these regulations. The regulations require a reporting system. We have to have policies and procedures for employees to report signs and symptoms of COVID when there's no alternate diagnosis, like, you're not diagnosed with the flu and you just have the signs and symptoms. Those people get designated as suspected COVID-19. And then, of course, suspected COVID-19 or confirmed COVID-19 employees are not allowed to be in the workplace. We are going to have to develop a return to work policy for employees who have had COVID to return to work. And there's a requirement that you can either use a symptom-based approach or a positive test approach, and only PCR tests can be used to calculate return to work. There's also a provision that if an employee refuses to take the test, that you remove the employee and then you use that alternate method. In terms of COVID testing for return to work, the employer is responsible for paying for it. So if an employee has health insurance through the town and the health insurance covers it, that meets that requirement. In terms of unvaccinated employees, they are required to observe physical distancing while at the work site. And that means whether they're on a break or not. Again, the way that these regulations are framed is that the obligation is placed on the employer. So Garth is going to be responsible for monitoring compliance with these requirements. The regulations recommend either verbal announcements, signage, visual cues, anything like that to promote physical distancing. And they also recommend decreasing worksite density by either limiting employee access or restricting access only to certain work areas. Now, again, this part here is just for unvaccinated employees. So you'd only have to do this for employees that you know are unvaccinated. The part that's not addressed in these regs, but I think is pretty obvious, is that every employer is going to have to find out which employees are vaccinated and which employees are not vaccinated. And then that has to be done in a specific manner because that's, HIPAA protected information and you have to keep it in a separate file.
We put that on elected officials, they fall under the same restriction of the statute.
You are an employer. They would not be an employer, no. Although they do pay the taxes.
They have the shovel that throws a coal in the furnace.
Right. So again, moving on in terms of unvaccinated employees, access to common areas, break rooms, lunch rooms, things like that, we are supposed to close or control those areas. And this is something that was in the regs before, although they tweaked it a bit. We're supposed to put signage at I guess, doorway to the building, indicating how many people are allowed in a room. Now, here's what I don't understand, and again, got these yesterday. So before, what they told you to do is calculate how many people could be in a room 6 feet apart, and then you were to post that outside the door. This says you're to post the occupancy that provides for the physical distancing of unvaccinated employees. Well, to me, how do you know how many people are unvaccinated? Anyway, I digress. We're required to enforce that occupancy limit. There's requirements for cleaning of facilities, has to be done once per shift, which would be once a day. And then hand washing facilities and hand sanitizer must be made available to unvaccinated employees. And this one I think is particularly troublesome. All shared tools have to be cleaned prior to transfer from one employee to another. So theoretically, I have to clean this before I hand it back to Martha. Staplers, scissors, paper removers. It's not going to be particularly fun or easy to implement. Thank you.
I'm not saying what I think about this.
Well, I'm not either.
Thank you very much.
Is there a time frame?
Yesterday.
No, not a start frame. Is there going to be this 4 months, 6 months, 8 months? Did he say? He just said
Forever.
Just is.
Yeah, it's what I do is I read the Virginia Department of Labor website, and when I looked at their website yesterday, they didn't even have it updated to include all of this. They have a lot of really good information. They do have some training resources that are helpful. When the governor loosened restrictions in June, he was kind of a little bit at odds with what the Virginia Department of Labor was saying, which kind of left everybody going, oh, what are we supposed to do? But I'm sure that there will be another amendment. This was what, 9 months, so maybe 6 to 9 months from now, they'll tweak it again because there'll be other issues that arise. But my neighbor went to a meeting where an infectious disease doctor from MCV was speaking. And at the end of her talk, her comment was that, we do fully anticipate mutations and that, we really kind of just need to adjust our thinking to operating in this type of an environment. So I thought that was particularly depressing.
Well, what are you telling us? You're saying that when we come to the next meeting, everybody's got to get masked? That's up here?
Yes, sir.
What else? What else?
You talk about limiting occupancy too. As a public body, we can't limit the public.
Well, you can. You can.
That's a mandate, so.
We may have to explore other ways for the public to view the meetings.
Correct.
Yeah.
I understand.
And again, but the distancing is for unvaccinated people.
Well,
And how are
and
we
these
to
are
know that?
also for employers and employees.
Correct.
People who, we are not the employers of anyone who comes here.
Correct.
People who are self-employed, who do not have employees, are outside of this.
So for example, if Roy is unvaccinated, he can no longer sit there. He has to be 6 feet apart from any other person.
It's nobody's business but his own whether he is or not.
Right. But again, nowhere in here do they say, oh, you have to find out. But how are you going to comply if you don't know?
You assume they are.
But if they find out they aren't, we're looking at $12,500 a day.
Or more, yeah.
But most of the regulations, it sounded like were for unvaccinated, but it sort of has to apply to everybody, whether they're vaccinated or not. So if you were vaccinated and you handed that back to Martha, the clicker, and she's vaccinated, does it have to be cleaned?
Once per shift. Once a day.
But if you're, neither one of you is vaccinated, then it needs to be cleaned before you pass it.
This is a nightmare.
Yes.
Okay.
Spot on. I
But
got in.
It is not enforceable.
I think that what we're gonna have to do, and I'll have to sit down with Garth, is we have to kind of pick through, you know, the meatiest parts of this and figure out how to try to make it work. And if we can't make it work, then at least be prepared with an explanation to the Department of Labor should they, you know, ask a question. You can only do the best that you can, and
If I can.
Especially by going over this material tonight, we are in compliance from the standpoint we're educating ourselves as to what's necessary.
yes, I would agree with that.
But I would also remind, this is Department of Labor. And we up here right now are not employees or employers of each other. We are not, this is about if you are a boss and you are protecting your employees, which does not apply to us.
I respectfully disagree. You employ Garth and others.
We're employers.
Yeah, so we have to follow the rules.
Andrea, I have a question about this. Just really, so unvaccinated employees have to be masked until this regulation is changed. Vaccinated employees can stop masking when we are no longer in a high rate of community transmission area.
No, when you're
Okay.
no longer in a substantial or high.
Okay.
I think they have 4 categories.
Okay.
And substantial and high are the 2 highest.
Thank you.
You're high. And pretty much everybody else is. I think there was one locality that was substantial. And it's all based on, you know, there's all these different sites for data. You can go to Johns Hopkins, the Department of Health. These regs are geared to the CDC site in terms of what the CDC, and their numbers are different than like other numbers I've seen. So.
Well, this is add another layer to the risk situation. Okay, not that, but now you're talking about $12,500 a day. It could be tacked on to the citizens of the town of Urbanna if we don't do what we're supposed to do. That's what you're saying.
Correct, yes.
And after having been informed at this meeting that that is the consequence, it could be argued that a violation is a willful violation.
Yep. Well, maybe.
I would construe it as an attempt to comply. The other thing that I think is challenging is that this CDC numbers mean that we're going to have to look at that CDC website at least once every week to see what our level of community transmission is.
Can you believe them? Yeah, it sort of is, if that's the.
When you have symptoms and they're gonna count you as having COVID.
Then that doesn't matter whether you believe it or not.
I will tell you, I had a case this past week with another client, and they had an employee who exhibited the symptoms of COVID, went and got tested, the test was negative, but the note from the doctor said, you have tested negative, however, you must continue to quarantine 10 days from the date of the onset of the symptoms. And that is not the first time I've heard that. That's the first time I actually saw the document, but I've heard that from several other people, that that's what doctors are saying.
I know someone that's saying you're negative.
That's, I guess.
Basically what it said.
Yeah.
I had a physician tell me that for every positive for every time they say this person, even though they haven't been tested, they're exhibiting symptoms, they get reimbursed from the government.
That's right.
I had a surgeon.
And I've also read a report that said 96% of the people who tested positive were not. So you really cannot trust the tests. And even the tests that you have to take in order to come back to work, the same test, it's not reliable.
The one thing I would point out is that for employment purposes and coming to work, you want to get a PCR test, not one of those rapid tests. Yeah.
Which is 7 more days.
3.
Good luck.
If you go to a Better Med and get in before 11, you can get the results the same day. I don't get anything from Better Med.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice working for you.
Bye.
Hold on, I'll get the door.
All right, boy, am I happy. Okay, it is now time for public comment. I have 2 people who have signed up, and I'm going to remind that, if you wish to discuss something that you have already brought forward, you are already on record as having said. So you are welcome to come up and spend your 3 minutes if you have something new to say. But before we do that, I want to ask if there's anyone in the group who meant to sign up but got here too late to sign up. All right, then we have 2 who have asked to speak, and the first is Ms. Putney. You're fine, okay, thank you. And Ms. Sturgill.
I think I did leave it on.
Light red?
Yes.
Okay, that's on.
Okay, this is just, regard to paying Crab House property. I just want to say to the council and other people here that I am highly offended by some of the comments I have heard with reference to how I feel about property. And I quote, I heard people say that I did not want those type of people next door to me. In my opinion, that's a racist comment. It's absolutely not true, and I don't appreciate anyone on council or anyone else saying that. Our property has a walkway that wraps around. It's open to the public. I enjoy watching people walk by there. I like having everyone having access to the waterfront. That is not my position or not wanting. My position for it to be at the marina is because it's a nice sandy beach. It's the ideal spot for it, and it just makes more sense. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, that closes public comment. And now we have public comment response period. Response. Okay, we'll close that. Any announcements to be made?
First cigarette tax meeting is Friday, I think it's the 17th, next Friday, and it's on Zoom, so I will be attending.
Thank you very much. All right, do we have a motion?
A motion to adjourn.
A motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? No discussion?
Yes.
So we will vote, Ms. Osborne.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Dr. Goldsmith.
Yes.
Don't forget Dr. Goldberg. Yes, Dr. Goldberg too. Ms. Hanson.
Yes. Bye, Mary.
Mr. Holberg.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
And Mayor votes yes. Meeting is closed. Thank you very much.